Hello, my name is Una and welcome to this week's Granny's Garden. Now this week we're going to be talking about how to care for your olive tree. Now here behind me we have a lovely example of a Oleo Europea, which is the European olive tree or Mediterranean olive tree. So during this video I'm going to be giving you 6 aspects that we've got to take into account when we're caring for our olive tree. Number 1, longevity. Now the average lifespan of an olive tree is 500 years, and it's not uncommon to find some examples or some specimens that are over 1,000 years old. And indeed the oldest known specimen is in Crete in Greece, where it's more than 3,000 years old. It attracts 20,000 tourists a year, and at 3,000 years old it's still capable of producing olive. Aspect number 2, buy big. Don't buy small. Now usually in my videos I always say buy small cans, they're cheaper, buy bare roots, they're cheaper. But if you are going to acquire an olive tree for your garden, for once I would say buy big. Don't buy a tree that's under 25 years old. People who grow in nurseries olive trees know what they're doing, and they're going to create and prune this first structure that's probably quite difficult to make sure that your tree is open and the skeleton which it's going to carry for the rest of its life is correctly formed. From then on, all you've got to do is maintain it. And later on in the video, I'll explain exactly how you maintain it. Now a 25-year-old tree is between 5 to 6 feet tall, and regards price, at least here in Spain, if you're talking about a 25-year-old tree, it's approximately about 145 euros. Now that's about $163. However, the older the tree, the more expensive it is. And the very old specimens, because some people do like to buy specimens that are almost 500 years old or even 1,000 years old, you're talking, depending on the type of trunk, somewhere between 10 to 50,000 euros. Now that's a whopping amount of money. Aspect number 3, transplanting. Now, unlike many species of trees, it is possible to transplant an olive tree even when it's mature. So if you do acquire a 25-year-old tree, it'll probably come in a can about this size, and you'll probably be able to transplant it yourself. It's a bit heavy, but you'll be able to transplant it between 2 people. As the tree gets older, especially if it's more than 100 years, I wouldn't try to do it yourself. I'd actually get a specialist in to do it, because they do get a bit more delicate as time goes on. Number 4, location. One of the most important aspects for this tree is it must be planted in full sun. It can be planted in any type of soil, but the most important lesson to be learned is any type of soil except wet. This tree hates having its roots in water or being wet. Now this tree, over time, because of its beauty, is making its way into gardens as an ornamental tree and not just as a production tree. And unfortunately, most people seem to want to plonk it right in the middle of their lawns. Now, if your grass is green, that means either of 2 things. 1, you live in a climate like Ireland where it rains a lot and the grass is green because it's wet all the time. Or 2, you live in a hot country where you've got irrigation, watering at least once or even twice a day. So if your grass is green, your olive tree, if it's planted in the middle of the lawn, is going to be a very unhappy tree. So where do you plant your olive tree? Well, as we said, you need to plant it in well-draining soil because it doesn't like being wet. Now, I don't know if you can see this on camera, but it is actually on a slight mound. Now, the actual difference might only be 4 to 6 inches, but those 4 to 6 inches make all the difference. It keeps it dry. Now, if ever you have the opportunity of coming to Spain, and particularly to Andalusia, and more particularly to a province called Jaén, which produces 20% of all the olive oil in the world. They have over 75 million olive trees, and all of them are planted on slight elevated mounds. because the most important thing is keep it dry. If in your mind, in your garden design, you really want to have your olive tree in the middle of a lawn, then put it in a container, but keep it dry. If not, plant it in the sunniest and best most drained area you have. So apart from the free draining, have in mind that this likes hot summers, but actually likes cool winters. It can take temperatures down to -7 without suffering any damage whatsoever. And if you've been following my videos, you'll know that I live in a zone 6, but in a mountainous region. And in winter, I can have nighttime temperatures of -5 very frequently. As a matter of fact, during several weeks or even several months. And it'll survive perfectly well, provided its summers are nice and hot or nice and dry. Now, it is possible in other climates, even like UK climate, to have an olive tree, provided it's kept out of the damp, and you can give it some protection in winter, which is why most people in more temperate climates plant them in containers that can be moved under a bit of protection or into an orangery or a greenhouse to overwinter in there. So it's just a question of having a little bit of care about its location and what it's planted in. Aspect number 5 is fertilization. Now this is really easy with ornamental olive trees. All you have to do is just once a year get either compost or manure and fertilize it in winter around the drip line. And I'll explain to you now what a drip line is. Now for newer people, or the newbies as they call them, what is a drip line? Imagine that I am the trunk of a tree and I've got an umbrella up, and that umbrella is the canopy of a tree. If it rains, the rain falls on the umbrella, travels out to the side, and then drips down straight to the ground. Now that circle where the rain falls off my umbrella, or in the case of a tree off the canopy, is called the drip line. So that's where you put the fertilizer. You do not put it against the tree itself. You put it on the drip line, which would be, in this case, about here. So you put down your compost or your manure, and you'd work it into the ground just a little bit, scratch it in or rake it in, and that's all you need to do once a year. And when do you do it? You do it in winter. Aspect number 6, and probably one of the most difficult ones, is the actual pruning. Now, one thing to have in mind, if you just want a shade tree and you have a huge property, you don't have to prune at all. You just leave it in a free draining area. It'll grow to about 15 meters high, and you won't really have to do anything except remove the water sprouts and forget about it. In my humble opinion, that's a big mistake, because if you want to do that, buy a different type of shade tree, a forest oak or any of the shade trees, and don't waste the opportunity of a trunk like this. The whole point of having an ornamental olive tree is the trunk, not the canopy. And this is just an amazing structure and gives great architecture to any garden. So don't look for a shade tree, look for a specimen. And as you're going to buy a tree that's 25 years old, look at the structure, because the structure you buy at 25 years old is the structure or the skeleton it's going to take with it all its life. Now this particular one is called a multi-trunk, and it's fused at the bottom. And then each branch moves out. Now what is important here, since we're going to talk about the aspect of pruning, is that it has to be open. If I go into the centre of my tree and look upwards, I've got to be able to see the sky. And if I can't see the sky, it hasn't been pruned correctly. Now, if you've been following me over these last few weeks, you'll know that I have been recovering a lot of the trees from this much neglected garden. Now, with this olive tree, I actually did start this winter. The canopy here was huge and it was very closed in. So I have taken it down considerably, but I have to keep working on it over the next 2 years. Now, what you can't do is something that's completely out of control, start eliminating left, right and centre branches, because all you're going to do is shock it and probably kill it. As you can see over here, I've got a problem. Now this branch sounds quite hollow, It's quite likely dead. As you can see, it's not got leaves like the others, and any leaves that are growing seem to be drying out. So I'm leaving the water sprouts at this level continue. So when the next season comes in, which is the next February or March, and I've got to do more pruning, I'll probably end up taking it down as far as here or down as far as here. I don't know yet, we'll have to see. And leave these grow and take over the branch I'm going to be removing. Now, as I stated before, the skeleton and the old part of the tree will always remain unless a part of it dies. And the upper part should be small. They should be small branches because you keep them pruned nicely. And the thickness should be about this. If you can get close on this. The thickness of the branch should be quite narrow. What should not happen is that it reaches a thickness like this. When you reach a thickness like this, which is about this size, it's because it hasn't been pruned. Now, these trees should be pruned once every 2 years. And if you prune it every 2 years, you're going to get branches like this all the time, but never are you going to get branches like this. All it means is it's been neglected. So over the next maybe 2 to 3 years, I'm going to recover most of this and leave this beautiful structure and the frothy branches that come off it every year. Now, when do you prune? If you live in a temperate climate, you'd be pruning probably in the autumn. But because I live in a climate with a cold winter, as we said, like -5 degrees virtually every night during the winter, I do my pruning in the month of February and the month of March. Now, I have left this deliberately because I knew I was going to film this video. The water sprouts. It's a tree that has a tendency to put out a lot of these sprouts. Now normally I pass by this every day, and what I do is, if it's small, all you've got to do is just take it in your finger and just pull it down and it comes off. Now if you let it grow a bit, it tends to be a little bit harder, and you need to get in your snips to do it. You go right in at the base and just snip it off. So what I'm going to do now is take off all these branches, and put on my gloves now. Take off all these branches. Remember, we're not going to touch this one because that's going to probably take over from the dead one. But all of this should be clean, and all around the base should be clean, because what you want to see is your structure. So I'm just going to get on with it now, and I'll come back in the end and just show you what a clean, finished looks like. That's our resident hedgehog's little house in there. So we'll leave him alone. Right, well already you can begin to see a nice clean structure. Obviously I haven't finished and I'll continue to do this later off camera. But keep on top of the water sprouts and it's really easy. I mean, it's like this because I wanted to show you on video that it has a tendency to get sprouts. But as you pass, it's like a bit of dust in the house. As you pass, just take it in your fingers, flick it, and it keeps it clean. Now, before I go, one tip. I have been asked, can you pick an olive direct from a tree? The answer is no. It's not going to kill you. It might make you a bit squeamish, but I can tell you the taste is something that's going to be stuck in your brain for the rest of your life. It is the most unpalatable, bitter taste you can ever imagine. When you go to Spain and you get your little tapas, these wonderful tasting olives, they've gone through a process that lasts 3 to 6 months and sometimes even longer of maceration in brine. So the answer is no. Just leave them on the tree and let the experts do their work. Anyway, for this week, it's bye from me. If you like it, give a thumbs up. It does help to grow the channel. And please join me next week for another episode of Granny's Garden. Bye now.